Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the Woke Blokes podcast. Ryan Hassan from the Centre for Healing here, joined as always by the Sultan of Steel, the where are you again? Agnes Waters, the aardvark of Agnes, Nick Sutherland of Myndfit, the ascended master of Agnes.
Could I be the ascended master of Augusta?
Oh no,
Um,
no.
listeners probably sick of us our golf talk, but just quickly, it's Masters Week and it's one of the biggest weeks of the year. So Hassan and I are up and about that. But you said you've come in a bit tired or a bit something, so there's no filter today.
There's going to be no filter. I woke up for whatever reason. I just woke up feeling shit, headache, stomach, like feel like I'm going to throw up, aching, aching body.
Oh,
Not great. And then I had a marketing meeting early. I just did a 2-hour class on anger, and here we are. So that's all right.
great.
I'm just
Could you could you
let it
have
roll.
COVID? Is COVID still a thing? Could you have
It's
COVID?
not important if it is.
Yeah, Is
I
anyone
could, I
is anyone
could.
still getting COVID or?
Yeah, no, that's so like 2021.
Yeah, right. Well, we've got a great show today. We're doing something new for the next 4 episodes.
Little series.
We're sort of a little series, the Masters series. Oh, starting in Masters Week. And Happy
We, we
Easter for
we
all
literally we literally had to talk about golf for about 10 minutes before we press record because we're like we don't want to talk about
yeah, we
golf
did.
on the show. We're talking about golf, but that's all right.
Yeah, I know. Happy Easter to all those who
Yes.
celebrate Easter. And
Interesting fact.
happy.
Interesting fact. I was trying to work out why it's an Easter bunny and their eggs. I'm like, why isn't it an Easter
Yeah,
chicken? And it actually
yeah.
goes back to the celebrations of the Germans in like the 11th century or something. And there were signs of fertility. So the egg is a sign of fertility, but also as far as an animal, the rabbit is a sign of fertility, and we know why because they're always fucking. So it's like that.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
just two signs of fertility. That's what it's all about. So because I'm like,
Interesting.
a rabbit's a mammal. It's not laying eggs. Like it just seems odd, but that's what it is.
Okay. Okay. All right. Good pickup. Thank you. I feel
Educated,
enlightened.
enlightened.
Yeah. And happy Bells Classic. Happy Bells Beach is on surfing. So it's a big weekend. Masters, Easter, Bells. It's all going on.
What about you, Nico? Give
Um,
us an update from leading on from last week to this week. How are you?
well, I've done a reverse James Brown. And that's that sounds like something.
You've done a Brown James.
Oh wow, that was so interesting. My mind just went straight back to living on the barracks in the army then because dudes were doing reverse kangas. James
Oh
Brown,
God,
they
no. Oh
do,
no.
yeah. That was so left field.
That was the thing.
Um, so I've gotten out of the funk. James Brown's retired. I'm out of the funk that I was in
Right.
last week.
Okay. What's happened?
Yep. Well, I took some notes down because I don't want to spend too much time on it because we're doing, as I said, the next 4 episodes are the Masters series. So you and I are both bringing in two people that we look up to, or their work that we look up to, and we're going to dive a bit deeper into that. So I just got some notes talking about it. Funnily enough, I don't know if anyone's cottoned onto this, but talking about it was quite cathartic, and I found it quite helpful. It's so weird. Have you
Listeners,
tried that or
take that on board. I've never spoken about anything before, but
yeah, me
I
neither.
might start. This might be the first time I ever talk about something on this show.
Well, I don't know why I did. It just sort of came to me. Maybe it was from a past life or something, but opening up about it. And more than that, not having an aversion to being in it. So not wishing I wasn't feeling that way or getting triggered by feeling that way. And subsequently not feeling any shame or embarrassment or I wasn't getting depressed that I was depressed. Um, so yeah, so that was a big one.
Literally what we were talking about on the show last week, wasn't it? It's like that non-resistance to being in some sort of state that you're in. So all of a sudden you're not fighting against yourself. You're not fighting against reality. You are in the experience that you're in and not needing it to go away. But then the funny byproduct of that is things can tend to lift a lot sooner, or we can come out of a funk because it'll move through of its own accord based on talking about it and whatever else you've done.
Energy flows where attention goes. So if you keep being fixated on it and keep thinking, I shouldn't be feeling this way or whatever, you're just going to elongate the experience. It's going to hang around longer. So, talking about it was great, to you, to myself, to Em. And it would have been very easy for a past version of me, the way that I used to operate, to go into that shame of thinking, I'm a mental health practitioner. I teach this stuff for a living. I shouldn't feel that way. As soon as you hear that word "should," there's an instant distortion. You're not in reality. So I spoke about it's a very stimulating environment up here because I keep looking at all the things I could do, and I sort of realized I was living in the potential in terms of looking after 40 acres. The reality is we've been here a couple of months. This is a 10-year project, so really had to sort of let go of my attachments and desires to it being any different to how it is. And also, a big part of the reason come up here was to create resources and work on the business, and that's very important to me. But I had to let go of that and just trust that I'm doing stuff as I'm doing it. It's going to take time and whatnot. So a lot of letting go of all of those attachments.
A lot of acceptance by the sounds of it.
Lots of acceptance, yeah. It's funny, acceptance is what got me out of it, and non-acceptance was what got me into it. So, a lot of when I was in my most challenging headspace many years ago, a lot of mantras and philosophies got me out of this. So that's my default is to use them. So I'm coming up with I could be sponsored by Nike, and I'm just doing this. Don't think, just do. So don't think about all the stuff you have to do. Don't think about what you need to do. Don't think it. Just stop thinking. I was being far too analytical with it all, which is a tendency of mine. So yesterday, for instance, I didn't have to. I'd gotten some new mower blades, and so I put the mower blades back on. I had no plans to mow the lawns or to do any yard work yesterday, and then I found myself at the end of the day having a nice cold beer because I'd spent the day mowing the lawns and beautifying the place, and Em had been out making her garden, and it was a wonderful day. But there was no conscious, right, today I have to do this, I have to do that. So it was just this, don't think, just do mentality.
Brilliant, mate. I love it. This is
wonderful
advice here for the listeners. Fantastic. And for me.
Less screen time. Start taking some multivitamins and ashwagandha. So ashwagandha helps with stress. So I'm just taking that as a temporary thing. I thought I'll chances be quite high that I'm probably deficient in some pretty important stuff. So started getting onto a men's multivitamin, and
So you've been looking after these areas, the physical, the mental, the emotional, expressing yourself. So brilliant, mate. That's what we spoke about as well. Like last week, being able to sort of step back a little bit from the experience and look at it objectively and not creating any extra narratives or labels or stories about what was going on. And then you're better able to deal with the situation. And that's what you've done. It's brilliant.
And I think the biggest part of it is just being here now, depression, past, anxiety, future, get yourself into a bit of a funk. And I talk about this and live and breathe it most of the time. And my primary state is being here now, but I'm still, as I expressed last week, I'm human. I'm not immune to the mind. I'm wandering off into those different spaces. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is once you have these tools and resources and have done enough of this work, your bounce back is a lot quicker.
Yeah.
So, where in the past I would have stayed in a funk for a long time, but my bounce back has been really quick because, I've got all these access to all these things. So it's been interesting.
Brilliant. Yeah. It's very automatic. This like the survival based, brain that wants to look at things from the past, plan for the future to avoid any stresses or catastrophe which causes stress in the first place.
Or
But
for it to be perfect, it's that
yeah,
I must get what I want. I must be living like it must be perfect. And I'm looking around going, oh, this place isn't perfect yet. I was getting overwhelmed by it all. So, yeah, it's as you were saying, it's just not looking at it through those lenses.
do you reckon Mr. Perfect, the wrestler, had that belief that he shouldn't be perfect?
No, he would have had the belief that he is perfect.
Yeah. His special move, the perfect plex. It was just a suplex where he held the leg, but he called it the perfect plex. And for some reason, it seemed to have a greater impact than a normal suplex on the people that he was fighting. Anyway, that's enough of me and my
It was
old
perfect. It was
WWF
perfect.
perfect. Brilliant. Man, I think there's some wonderful nuggets there for the listeners, especially just the first one. Like a lot of our listeners, 3/4 of them are guys. And it's like, oh, talking about things and not having them, looping on themselves within us, within our mind, being able to externalize them and have them land on ears that can hear is very, very therapeutic in of itself. So I think, it's the classic stereotype that, us guys have trouble opening up and whatnot. And I think if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably at the stage where you are or you want to be on that path. And this kind of reinforces that message.
But I guess a lot of the time, blokes don't want to open up because they don't feel they want to open up. Sorry, but they don't feel that there's a safe space to open up in.
Mhm.
So when I open up to you or to Dan, I've got people I go to open up to because I know there's going to be compassion and that space will be held for me, and I can get things out without any judgment or being criticized or whatever. So yeah, it's not about just opening up. It's open up to the right person and in the right place.
Yeah, absolutely. Very,
So
very true.
find that person in your life, and if you don't have them, and it's not for your friends to therapize you either. I mean, I'm lucky that I didn't open up to you, to get any therapeutic advice. I just opened up to you as a mate. But if your mates do check in on you and are genuine about it, that's great. But then you've got to go and see someone who can actually assist you as well. So
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, let's get this show on the road, mate.
who's coming in today? Who's on
Mickey
the
Singer is our ethereal guest. I should try and get him
Mickey
on the show.
Singer?
Michael Singer. We're going to do this series like Nick said. We're going to have I'll do someone and then Nick and then me and then Nick. And we're just going to pick 2 people each who've had an impact on our lives in a very, very positive way, whose teachings that have resonated with us. And they're honestly people that you would have heard us if you've listened to the show for any period of time, you would have heard us reference. But I thought it's worth taking a bit of a deep dive, or Nick thought it was good to take a deep dive into maybe why it resonates, what we've been able to take away, how their message or what they teach has, or the way they live their life has impacted us. Because having these mentors and being in the world that we live in now, where we can access so much information through the internet, Michael Singer is not someone that I've met yet. I feel like he's a mentor of mine, and I've learned just so much from him because I've listened to, my God, hundreds of hours of him speaking. So you really get to know someone, and that makes it weird, because if one day I go and meet him, it'll be kind of that weird thing where it's like, I get that sometimes, like people who've taken a bunch of my courses, so they've heard me crap on for God knows how many hours. And then I'll meet them, and they're like, oh, I kind of feel like I already know you. I'm like, okay, I don't feel like I know you. So let's see, how do we come to a bit of an agreement here?
So many clients have reached out to us because they've listened to the podcast and they're just like, yeah, it feels like I know, and they've got their head around a lot of, they've already got a head start in sort of doing the work. And I'm like, all right, well, I've got to catch up because I haven't,
Yeah.
I haven't met you yet.
Where's your podcast? Let me listen to you. And so, so Michael Singer, a little bit of background on him. So he lives in the States, in the middle of nowhere. I can't even remember what state it is now. I came across his work, I don't know how many years ago now, but he had a really best-selling book called The Untethered Soul. A lot of you might have read it. And books are interesting. you can read them, and because I remember certain books in my time, and I've read fucking God knows how many, and I'll recommend to people because I'm like, oh, this is going to be great for them, and for whatever reason they don't have the same experience I did, or I've read a book once and then for some reason when I've read it the second time, I'm like, holy shit, and I've had a completely different experience. So the information of books are really kind of dependent on where we're at in our life as well and what's going to land. I actually had that.
Totally. I've just pulled up his Wikipedia page. Sorry to just quickly interrupt. So he lives and teaches at the Temple of the Universe. It's a yoga and meditation center he founded in 1975 near Gainesville, Florida.
So to give you a bit of context around that, so basically when he was a young man and studying at college, it might have been like 20 or early 20s, he was sitting on a couch with a friend and he kind of became aware of the voice in their head. And that's why some people, you're like, I talk about, the voice in their head, and like, I haven't got one of those. I'm like, how do you know? Well, I just thought, like, I don't have one. I'm like, that's the voice. You know what I mean? So sometimes we're lost in it and we don't kind of wake up to it. And he was sitting there on the couch with his friend, and he noticed there was kind of this awkward silence, and his mind kept trying to think of something to say. Then to go, no, don't say that. That's weird. Or yeah, try and say this. And he just noticed this constant trying to make the situation okay. And then he kind of turned to his friend and he just goes, hey, do you like have a voice in your head that like talks all the time? And the guy goes, yeah. And they both just sat there for like a long time in silence and started laughing and whatnot. And that started his, I suppose, journey of like wanting to understand what that is. Because when he realized it was always chatting and talking, and oftentimes told him to do something, and then later on, if he did that, it'd beat him up for doing the exact thing that it told him to do. And he's like, man, I think if I'm going to try and understand something in this life, I think I need to understand this. And so he got involved in meditation, and he did the classic, spiritual, awakening kind of thing, where he did move out to Gainesville at a young age and said, I'm going to dedicate my life to meditation. And so he did the thing where he would meditate for, basically all day, every day. He'd eat the absolute bare minimum to keep his body going. And, he would try to remove himself from society to be in the most quiet place possible, in this tiny little shack in the middle of nowhere, so he could just focus on his meditation. And what he started realizing was, after doing it, he did it for a couple of years, but he noticed he'd just still have problems. He'd be in the middle of nowhere doing his meditation and starting to feel bliss and all this energy. And then a dog would bark in the distance, and his mind would go, oh, that fucking dog, it's ruined my enlightenment, So he realized, it's like, well, no matter where I go, I've got this thing, crapping onto me. And so he decided to, live his life where, and he has another book that I went to after The Untethered Soul. The Untethered Soul is very much sort of concepts, like what is the voice in the head? Why do we have it? Why does it say the things that it does? Why does it, react in these certain ways? And everyone sort of who read that, pretty much frothed that book, and he went on Oprah and all that kind of jazz. And that
was in 2000. That was 2007 that came out.
Yeah, so quite a while ago. And so, but then he released a book after that, because everyone's like, oh, and I kind of felt the same thing. It's like, oh, cool, spiritual concepts. Like I've read a lot of books like that. That one was a really good one, but I'm like, good one. So he goes, all right, well, let me now write a book about my life and how I apply this to my life, which he called the surrender experiment. And so his path became one of surrender, which he calls surrendering the personal self. So the personal self was what we would kind of call the ego. So when the ego gets involved in life, it's not dealing with reality, so to speak. It's dealing with itself, that reality is stimulating. So in every moment, we might be sitting on the podcast here and we're talking about whatever it is, but then secretly my main incentive is that I want to appear, likable to Nick, or I want to appear smart to the people that are listening, or whatever it is. And you realize that we bring this into pretty much most of our situations in life. And so his surrendering was surrendering preference, I guess, of the ego, so to speak. So he just started surrendering to whatever life was presenting him with. And so he was living by himself out in this shack, and then from memory, a friend wanted to come out there.
Was that after he'd done his software developing?
No. So this is sort of how it came about. Yes, and this is one of the reasons which I'm going to bring up why I'm a big fan of his too, because he built $1 billion business whilst being on this very spiritual path. Because a lot of people see those as being very diametrically opposed. And so his friend came out and he goes, his friend was a builder, so Michael learned a bit of building off him, and they put an extension on this little shack that he had. And then kind of some lady came out and wanted to stay there too. And he's never moved from this place in the bush since he went on his meditation journey. And now he's got a fucking temple there and a giant office and all this kind of stuff. So everyone kind of came to him. And he came up with the idea because he started researching a lot of, ancient scriptures. If you hear him speak, he references the Bible a lot. Trying to break down a lot of the misconceptions around the message in the Bible. The one thing that he speaks about probably the most is the ancient Hindu scriptures, so the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita. And I love some of the ways that he references that in terms of, the work that I do. It's helped me explain a lot of things to clients quite well. And so he decided to build this temple in the middle of nowhere, and he called it the Temple of the Universe because people, it doesn't matter what beliefs you have, either spiritually or religiously, let's just come together and celebrate, life and being kind and enjoying each other's company.
Existence.
Yeah. So he had I think he said early on, it was a little shack kind of thing and people would sit on the ground. But he had, there would be a picture of Christ. There'd be one of the Buddha. There'd be Hindu gods. And there's no, it didn't matter. You just come and do whatever. And all of a sudden, there'd be a couple of people coming on a Saturday or Sunday whenever he did a talk. And then all of a sudden, just more people just started coming, and he didn't advertise it or anything.
He didn't want to be a spiritual leader, though, did he? He didn't want to start a cult or anything.
No, and that's why. And this, I suppose, I hadn't thought about it in this way, actually. But you're right. And so he's been doing that for, my God, 40 something years, maybe more. And he still does the same thing on the weekend. He just sits down and talks about life and the voice in their head and spirituality. And it hasn't descended into a cult, which is actually a really, a really good sign of somebody who's done the work, because those kind of things more often than not descend into a cult with a leader who has sex with all the people who are following. Anywho. And so he ended up, a local police officer, I believe, in the area went past and was looking at the job they did extending the little house, and one of them wanted a house built. And he goes, "Could you build a house?" And then him just surrendering, because at first he goes, the mind says, "I can't do that. That's too much responsibility." He just goes, yeah, we can do that. And so him and his friend built a house for this policeman and ended up starting a construction company in the local area. So that was his first business, was in construction. And so he would do that. And his whole, like I said, the whole time, he's just like, he'll just kind of surrender himself. And if life presents him with something, he'll walk, like you're talking about, right? You were saying that action without, thinking and debating whether I need to do this,
what
this,
should
this,
I be doing?
Yeah, he'd just sort of go, okay, that's okay, life. Let me do that. And so, he did that construction thing. And then one time he walked into a Radio Shack, and it was when personal computers were first kind of becoming a thing, and not many places had them, and they had one on display there. And he said he had a little look and play with it, and he just felt all this energy and kind of excitement and everything within him. So he bought it and then learned how to code, and then got obsessed with that. And then someone who it was the construction company itself. He set up like a booking and invoicing system using computer software, which we all do now. But back then it was like, what, you're going to use a computer for that? Normally you'd write it out and mail it to them and whatnot. And then some other companies came to him and said, "Hey, can we get some sort of software like that for our business?" And then that started a software company, and he made a software that doctors and healthcare professionals could use for all of their, I think, the appointments and billing and invoicing and all that. And at one point, that software was used in the majority of places all around America of healthcare clinics, thus being a multi-billion-dollar company. And in the surrender experiment, he talks about that, like having to all of a sudden wanting to be alone in the woods and just meditate. And now he's out there and he's in charge of like 40 different people report to him on a daily basis. And there's all these conversations about mergers and buying up other companies and all that kind of thing. And there was some fuckery that went on with some of the salespeople, and he had might have been a 4-year-long court battle where he was, going to go to jail for something he didn't do, that his company was made to be liable for. And so he speaks in the surrender experiment about even that whole process, just surrendering to the fact that, I'm on a plane to face federal court and might go to jail at some stage later today. And so that's one thing that I love, because I went down the spiritual path. I read so many books, jumped into so many people's work. And it's like, their whole life was just about, talking about spiritual concepts and not really living it. Or I'd find out later, they were an asshole to their wife and their kids. Yeah, they'd get up on stage and they're just love and light. We've got to be great to everyone. And so just him, I saw someone who lived a bloody incredible life and still does. He's still with us, and went through trials and tribulations, done all this stuff in the world. Yet he said in the whole time, like, my number one focus was this spiritual path and using life to let go of my personal self and my preferences.
The word surrender, it's an interesting one, because we spoke last week about manipulating and trying to manipulate things or manufacture things or force things to happen. And surrendering is the polar opposite. But things still happen when you surrender. It's not. A client put it really well. I don't have it at my fingertips, but he said it was appropriately passive, I think. And it's not a just give up and sit back and just, it is this: stop trying to force or manufacture or manipulate people or the universe or whatever to get what you want, basically. And it's such a foreign concept for the ego, because the ego is like, but hang on, what I want is very important. I demand that I go and do all these things, because then I will be seen in a really positive light and people will adore me, or I'll have millions of dollars and I can sleep whoever I want. I can drink and do and go wherever I want. And it's all about me and what I can do instead of about what can I offer.
Yeah, he talks about being in service of the moment. And, and I've brought this up on many podcasts before, but I did a course of his many years ago, and there's 8-part series, and one of the parts, it was over an hour long, and he literally just talks about the Big Bang and how the universe started. And I'm like, listen to this thing, and I'm like 35 minutes in, and I'm like, he's explaining hydrogen clouds forming together. When there's enough gravitational mass, the hydrogen will fuse into helium, and then how different stars are made. I'm like, what am I listening to? This is a science lecture or what? Which he does talk about science a lot, which is a great marriage of the two, because he doesn't see that and spirituality is separate. And then, he speaks about, the earth getting formed and how life started to spring out. And anyway, he goes through this whole thing, and about 50-something minutes in, how your great-great-great-grandma and great-great-great-grandpa met in a lake that was formed by a dinosaur footprint millions of years before, and they, shared a moment in the lake when they were bathing and all this. And he goes, so 13.8 billion years of cause and effect with greater complexity than our human mind can even comprehend is sitting in front of you. And then you have the audacity to go, I don't like it. This should be different. And so it's like this whole thing leading up to just going, oh my God, how funny is the ego or the personal self? This incredible moment, which has taken basically magic to appear before us. And we just have the audacity to go, nah, this should be a different way. And so
Brian Cox talks about it very similar as well. Is like, humanity in the existence of the universe is in this tiny little window, and you're sitting there going, yeah, this isn't enough. This isn't enough. There must be more.
This isn't enough. Yeah. I heard someone else. No, it might be Singer. And he's like, what do you want to go in space? You want to go to Mars? There's nothing on Mars. They've been searching on Mars for decades trying to find the signs that there might have once been water. We've got fucking water everywhere. There's grass, there's trees, there's people, there's animals, there's all this stuff to interact with. And we're like, no, let's go into space. And so, and so being in service of the moment, and what you were talking about is...
Sorry, before you go into the service, do you reckon that there must be more is an ego-related thing? Because when I talk to clients about it, I come at it from there's a sense of deficiency. That's that this isn't enough. There must be more. And so Earth's not enough. These beautiful trees and forests and rivers and lakes and snow, that's not enough. There must be more. Let's go to Mars. Like, is that, do you consider that to be an ego thing?
Well, yeah, well, it's a very human thing, right? It's like this human drive for... it's like, well, we made a car that goes this fast. Well, I want to make one that goes faster, and then goes faster, and then goes faster. It's like, well, I made an atom bomb that can blow up the world. So I made a hydrogen bomb that could blow up the world 5 times. It's always more. Like, it's never enough.
Yeah, it's insatiable, isn't it?
Yep. It's a hunger that could never be satisfied. So that's it's kind of great in some ways, but then also so limiting in other ways. Because, like, we've
This is where balance is so important for it.
yeah,
And you talk about insatiable on a global level, um, but you and I have both had that insatiable. There wasn't enough drugs, there wasn't enough alcohol, there wasn't enough whatever, and so it can happen on so many different levels. But it's the same thing. Fundamentally, it's the same thing,
it's
just on a
like
different plane.
we fucking, I don't know if anyone will know this, but me and Nick love golf, and it's like I'm working my ass off to get a little bit better at golf. And it's like, well, can't you just go out there and just, shoot a somewhat similar score forever? It's like, no, I want to get better. So it's that same mechanism, right? And it's
Yeah.
like, I need more and more booze and drugs to try and just fill up this hole inside me. So it's like, it's not all bad and it's not all good, and you use the word balance. And that's like, probably, in years of doing therapy, that's probably the overarching theme that comes up for nearly everybody at some point in their therapy journey. So we need to achieve some sort of balance in your life, because one or oftentimes many areas are completely out of balance and it's black and white and it's too much skewed down one end.
Yeah, and another word for balance is aligned. For instance, it's just this: as soon as it's like the old wooden seesaws at the park, and if you find that sweet spot when you stand on it and you can just balance it, it's not just standing perfectly still in the middle of it. It's finding that sweet, and it's just this gentle ebb and flow. And you're going to move left, you're going to move right a little bit, but it's just that line. As soon as you come out of alignment from that balance point, as a person, functioning, then you're going to become dysfunctional. So you're very functional when you're balanced. As soon as you step past these certain points, then it becomes dysfunctional in the way that you're thinking, or the way that you're feeling, or the way that your body's working. So for me, yeah, same. I love what you just said. For me, years and years of doing this work, the fundamental principle for me is balance. It's my one. That's where I come home to. It's my focal point.
Yeah. Yeah. And then,
Last week I was out of balance. So I was, in a sense, dysfunctional. I wasn't functioning properly.
yeah. Yeah. I had, because I've spent most of my life very out of balance. And I have this extreme kind of nature, and I like that now because I can channel it, and I'm a little bit crazy, and that's okay. But I remember last week, and this is what I learned from Singer as well. Like last week, we had someone in our community, in our practitioner community, she's been in there for a few years, and she just said, "My God, I've been in many different communities and whatnot, and I can't believe how well this one is run, and blah, 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 and the energy, hats off to you guys, blah, blah, blah." And I remember thinking at the time, and it sounds like it sucks so much fun out of life, but it doesn't. It brings much more balance. I'm like, oh, she's having an absolutely wonderful day, and the world's confirming all of the beliefs she has about herself and everyone else. And that's why she said it. Someone else who was having a bad day might say the opposite thing, So it's like all of a sudden, I don't get pulled in a positive way too much, which also means I don't get pulled in a negative way too much. Because if someone says something negative, I'm not like, no, that's wrong. Can't believe they said that. It's like she's having a bad day and the world's not confirming the belief she has about herself and other people. And because it's not being confirmed, she's in adversarial state. So it's like this balance where we ideally don't get pulled in either direction. Or if we do, we recognize it.
But for me, that's your ego not being activated. So I've had many similar experiences where a client said, I don't know, my life would be a mess without doing this work. And I remember vividly a client walking out the door going, "Thank you so much for what you do." And literally without thinking, I'm like, "Oh, it's not me, it's the Dharma." I'm just a conduit for this stuff. And I was sincere and genuine in saying that. I wasn't trying to, but thank you. I made sure I thanked them for their statement. But and as they walked off, I was just like, huh, that was interesting. And the ego was like, "Oh, I missed my chance to get involved there. Oh, God, damn it!
I went out the back for a cup of tea for 1 minute and I could have had a moment."
Yeah, could have got all up and about, and no, missed his chance. And I love those. I love those moments because it's just further evidence and not maybe validation, but it's further information, I guess, that having done all this work, he's working for me because of how out of balance I've been in the past. That was my biggest problem. It wasn't, there's lots of symptoms and surface level issues that came with it, but the fundamental issue was that I was out of balance. So I guess, just thinking about it now, that's why I made the first fundamental priorities and making sure that we get rid of the word work-life balance and just make sure your life is in balance. You've got this life balance going on there.
So
Well,
you made me laugh. Like last night, but she messaged me something about a vacation 2 days ago, and then sent me a meme about a vacation yesterday. And she was upstairs, and I just walked upstairs and went, "What are you trying to escape from, babe?" She's like, "Shut up," because our whole life is not about like work life. It's all just life. It's
yeah,
not. There's
yeah,
no
yeah.
dichotomy. Nothing to
That's
escape from. So back to being in service of the moment and surrender. And I loved what you said because people lump in surrender and completely giving up in the same bucket, but that's just not the case. And Singer talks about that quite a lot. And he's like, when your personal self is out of the way, then you can properly serve the moment. So when he was running this giant company, it's like, well, we've built this software and it's being used, in all these places and everything. We want to make it the best that it can be because that's what the moment is asking of me. It's not about, well, I've got to make it the best because I want to be seen in this way and I want to earn this much money. It's just the moment. And when he was involved in all these 4 years of, or however many years it was, of this law battle, which was a serious lawsuit in jail, it doesn't mean that he goes, well, I'm going to surrender, so I'm not going to hire any lawyer team. I'll just represent myself and I'm just happy to go to jail. No, he like paid a shitload of money and got a great law team because it's something that he didn't do. And he defended himself to his best ability. But it wasn't based on a personal self where it's like, well, I've been wronged. This shouldn't be happening. That they're signs that a personal self's involved. You spoke about should and shouldn't, and we've spoken about it on the podcast before, but that's just a red flag that we're in resistance to the present moment if that's what's coming up.
Yep.
What else? What else about Mickey Singer? One thing I like about him is that in his kind of teaching when he gives talks, and I've listened to him a lot, he's got a bit of like an angry tone sometimes. And I like that. It's not angry like, what's the energy? It's kind of like, look, I love you, and you're like this infinite being, like that's got so much love to express. Wake up. It's kind of like that. It's just a little bit like slightly assertive tone.
I've been told I have that
Yeah. Maybe that's why I like
in
you.
working with my clients. Maybe, or it's because I beat you in golf. Um, it's and I say to clients, coming from, I just met with a lady up here the other day at the beach. She's ex-military and wants to create a veterans retreat. And so I went and said, if there's anything I can do to help or assist, and I won't charge for anything. It's just happy to be on board, whether it's just helping you to create it or actually being involved in it, whatever. And talking about it, and she's so passionate, but she doesn't sort of have the therapeutic understanding of it all. And so I just spent some time explaining it. And I said, I guess I've got an approach where because I've been there and done it and have relatable, I can come at it from a very different perspective, and so can you. When you come from the streets, or when you come from that background, you're not coming from the clinical angle of it. It's not just I've sat in a classroom for 4 years and got a degree and then going to go and talk about the theory of it all. You've actually been there and done it. It does give you this very different way of being able to connect. And so many clients have said it's exactly why they came to Myndfit, because it's what they need. They don't need someone to say, "Oh, that's terrible. Oh, let's sit here for a few weeks and figure out why and whose fault is it. Oh, it's your parents. Oh, it's your childhood. Oh, you had trauma in childhood. Oh, no." I sit there and go, "All right, well, this is it. This is it. Let's figure out how to get out of it, and we'll validate what you're feeling and everything." But so you can use that. I guess it's a little bit of kick him up the bum. It's a bit of assertiveness, but that's really quite effective.
Yeah. No, I have that a lot with especially with addiction clients. It's like, okay, you come in and now I'll explain to you, these certain things have happened to you. You were unaware. You went through unideal circumstances, didn't have the skills to understand how to manage your emotions, all of that, right? So you've been playing out unconscious patterns and they've led you down the path of destructive behaviors and addiction. Once you're aware of all that now, I'm like, I have so much compassion for you and I've been there myself, right? But now, I'm not letting you off the hook from this point forward. It's like from now on
Mm.
that we know all that and we know
Mm.
that you want to leave that behind and where we want to go. It's like I'll give you a free pass up until now because you've been acting unconsciously, but not anymore.
Well, doing this work's hard, and if we
Yeah.
don't hold them accountable, they're gonna try and skip the curriculum. They're gonna wag class, and then they're gonna go, oh, it didn't work. Going to see someone didn't work, and I'm like, it's not. I've done my work, and I'll continue to do my work. It's not for me to do your work for you. It's for me to say, here's the work, here's the path. Start walking down the path.
Yeah.
I say to clients all the time, you're not doing enough. And they're like, oh, you can't tell me that. And then I follow up with, I want you to give up. And they're like, what sort of therapist tells a client to give up? And I'm like, that's that surrendering. Give up. Don't give up on yourself. Don't give up trying, but give up your attachments and shitty beliefs about what should be happening. Give up all those crappy lenses and filters that you've got, and let's start doing a bit of a clear out. And I understand that that's daunting. I understand that's challenging. I understand that's the unknown, and that's going to create a bit of anxiety. But I want you to feel that anxiety. Just sort of lean into it. And they're like, oh, right. And I guess just think of it now, because I'm solid and you're solid in our approach and the way that we do it. I guess that gives them confidence. Like I'm saying, all right, you're doing this, but you got to lean into it. You got to step into it. It's like helping someone to skydive or to bungee jump or whatever. If someone's going, oh, geez, the weather's a bit, oh, I'm not sure we should do this. Yeah, the person trying to do whatever it is isn't going to feel very confident.
Imagine that. You're going
So
up on the plane and the person you're jumping is going, oh, I don't like heights. You're like, oh, for
they're
fuck's
like, oh,
sake.
is this my backpack with my lunch in it, or has this got the parachute in it, or
And you know what? You know what the sad truth is? There's many psychologists and therapists out there who do that.
yeah, I know. Yeah. So you like that about him? He's got this bit of gumption, a bit of
Yeah,
a,
yeah. It's
you
kind of
know,
he'll start. I've listened to so many of his talks. They might go for half an hour, 1 hour, whatever. And he's so soft at the start, and then as he starts getting onto a topic, he'll kind of get more and more revved up, and then by the end, he kind of ends up. It's that energy. He doesn't say it, but the energy is like, come on, like I know what potential you have. I know what lies within you. Wake up out of this bullshit that the lens that you're seeing the world through. So I do like that about him, because I think that resonates. I needed that early on. And I kind of give that, to varying degrees depending on the client, but I definitely do give that as well. So I appreciate that about him. A lot of what he's taught me about the Hindu scriptures as well. I love, introduced me to the samskaras, which is a mental and emotional imprint, and how, basically our world is made up of our samskaras. And it's so funny. We think we have so much free will and volition that we're making decisions about what's right and what's wrong and whatnot, but it's purely just our conditioning being stimulated in the moment. It's like, he starts off with the very basic kind of Buddhist analogy of, the snake and the butterfly. So it's like, I might go to a field and it's a nice field, and I'm there one day and as this beautiful, incredibly colored butterfly comes and lands on my arm, and it sits there. I'm just in awe of it. Then after a while, it flies off, and then I leave, and I'm feeling all this joy and happiness, and it's so good. But I create a mental impression, a samskara. It's a positive one, not a negative one. So then I go away, and it's so good. And the next day I come back to that field, and I'm looking around, and I'm like, where's that butterfly? It's not here today. And so now I'm not enjoying the field the next day because the butterfly hasn't landed on my arm again. And
have you heard that? But before you go into the snake one, the Dalai Lama's quote around that is, when we don't get what we do want, we suffer, and when we do get what we don't want, we suffer. So when we do get what we don't want, I don't want to miss out on the butterfly. And when the butterfly doesn't turn up, we suffer, and it's all got to do with attachment. And when we don't get what we do want, so it's this. Yeah, it comes back to surrendering again.
So that's literally the cause. Those two things are literally the cause of all stress in all human beings. And so, and if we're looking at it through the lens of Michael Singer, he would say, like, well, instead of then, creating a list, like he said, in one of his teachings, now I'm remembering, it's like, well, here's a blank bit of paper, write down, like, all the stuff that you want. And then you'll see people writing down all these lists of, well, I want this much money and I want this partner and I want this type of car and all this kind of stuff. And it's like you've limited the parameters to your experience that these things are going to make you okay. It's like, what if you were just okay with everything? It's like it's like, well, if I just need this amount of money saved and then I'll be okay. Well, what if you start off by being okay? And then instead of trying to it's cutting out the middleman, so to speak. So he's like, let's widen our parameters of what we deem to be acceptable in this life, because then all of a sudden you become, what we're all seeking. We're essentially bulletproof and we're free because anything can happen in front of us and we know that we're going to be okay. And that's part of the path. Like we want to widen it because all of us have this very limited set of parameters. And, for me, for a lot of my life, it's like, I need to be up and about and happy and excitable and everyone liking me. And then I'm okay. And so whenever I dip outside of that, it's like a panic state and everything needs to change so I can fit those parameters again.
Yeah. And that's those toxic beliefs in here. It's, I must be loved and liked. And then, so that's the driving force. So a lot of our work, our primary work is coming back to this. We're all ignorant, incompetent, and mediocre, and that's okay to some degree. And it's just being at peace with, looking outside the window, being at peace with so many. It's perfect the way it is. It's absolutely perfect the way it is. But because I had these desires for it to be different to how it is, based on my concept of what is beautiful, and then that was putting me into suffering. It's that was just a source of stimulus. It was my reaction to it that was causing distress within me.
Yeah. And then so he calls like the not okayness, where it's like as soon as you start to focus on this, you'll realize all the areas of your life that you're not okay, and it's a lot. It's like, wow, I need to have a job go the certain way. It needs to be finished on a certain date and the customer needs to be happy. I need to come home. My partner needs to be in a certain state around me. My kids need to have done something or be in a certain mood around me. I need to get a certain amount of sleep and it has to be not raining tomorrow. And all of a sudden you realize all the conditions we have on our happiness. I think it's in The Untethered Soul. There's literally a chapter called The Path of Unconditional Happiness, and where it's like trying to remove all these conditions we have on our happiness, where it's like, I'm just going to be happy no matter what. And then if we make that commitment, it highlights all the stuff that does make us happy. And that's where our work is then. That surrender that we're talking about, that's when we start to work with the moments that we deem, no, this isn't okay. This shouldn't be happening. So, well, that's where our work is. That's where our personal self is heavily involved. And we need to work out why.
And that's where it doesn't become passive. You're not surrendering and just giving up. You're surrendering your attachments. You're surrendering your desires for the world to be any different to how it is. And that's all you're surrendering. But it takes a lot of strength to let go of those things because we're living in fear of deficiency or not having enough resources, not having enough of this or that, not being seen in a certain way. So most humans are living in a perpetual state of anxiety and this fear. And then when you ask them to let go, they're like, let go of what? No, I'm fine. I'm good. I'm not holding on to anything. Yeah, you sure?
You feel the clench.
Yeah,
I'm not holding on to anything.
Yeah. All right, well, I'll just take this away from you. Oh, no, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. All right, well, I'm just going to say this about you, and it's a little bit unpleasant, but I'm going to reflect. You can't say that to me. Don't say that.
It's like taking the pacifier, the dummy, away from the child. No. I need to pacify. It's the exact same movement.
I am happy when X, Y, and Z is in place and everything is in place for me to feel safe and secure. That's where I'm at my optimal. I'm at my best and I'm flourishing and life's wonderful. But as soon as you take away X, Y, and or Z,
so as soon as the universe changes, you're saying?
Yeah, you could put it that way. Yeah,
right. That fundamental of how the universe works in constant change.
That
happens.
Yeah.
So what are the chances of unhappiness and suffering then?
Well, if you're holding on and needing X, Y, and Z to be there, I guess the chances of suffering would be quite high.
It would be 100%, I would say.
Well, I'm just looking at it as a math equation, and yeah, I guess
Quite
it would
high.
be 100%.
No remainders. It's just 100%.
So that's fundamentally what, everyone's running around just in this illusion that they're happy, but it's because these things are in place, and so I guess we're trying to teach people, whoever it is, Michael Singer or the Buddha or Ryan Hassan or whoever, it's just this. All we're trying to do is to teach people how to be wholeheartedly happy, but also how to allow yourself to be wholeheartedly unhappy when it's appropriate and when it's necessary.
Absolutely, absolutely. And just yeah, another one that came to mind, sorry, just about the personal self that he uses. It's like, it's a good example. Like the guy, in his office gets a phone call one afternoon and his teenage son at school, and it's the principal, and he's like, oh, little Johnny, we just found some drugs in his locker. We're going to need you to come down to the school immediately. And so you hang up the phone, and the first thing is, oh, how could he have done this? My God, like, how could he have done this to me? This is a
He's
reaction that
embarrassed
so
me.
many people would
Yeah.
have. And so Singer says, don't you leave your fucking office. Doesn't say fuck, but I like to add the fuck. Sorry, Singer. Don't you leave your fucking office and go to that school until you've dealt with that. Because
Hmm.
otherwise, you're going to the school to purely defend yourself and your own
Yeah,
reputation.
you're making it about
How
you,
does that
not
help your
about.
son? How does that help your son?
Oh.
So all of a sudden, you're no longer in service to the moment. You're in service of your own ego. We had, I'm sure I brought this up on the show before, but we had so many families who had addicted kids come into the center. And this one lady came in, I'll just never forget it. She's like, oh, daughter, she's doing meth and she's engaging in all this dangerous behavior. And yeah, it's been going on for a while. We've known for a bit. She's speaking about it like with very little emotion attached. And then she goes, but anyway, the reason we've come in and booked in a consult is because this week, my friends and family, they now know it's got out. And she was fucking all caught. That was the biggest stressor for her. Not that her daughter, her beautiful daughter, was on drugs and really struggling with her life. But now the friends and family had found out. And all she fucking gave a shit about was how it reflected on her. So it's like, this is an example of like that personal
This is
self being the number one determinant of why we take action.
this is why I have a discovery session. I'm not willing to enter a relationship with a client until I am 98% sure that they are willing to surrender, that they're willing to give up, their ego's ideas, and stop being so selfish and self-centered, and I can't work with anyone. I can't reach a person. Um, and that's the old, before you can heal a man, ask him if he's willing to give up that which is making him sick to begin with.
Mm.
I can't heal someone unless they come in saying, all right, I don't know how to do it, but I'm prepared to give this up. I've got this wonderful client in Thailand at the moment. He's an English bloke, and he, shout out to you when you get to this. He's starting the podcast at episode 1, so it's going to take him a while to get here. And it's a beauty thing. He knows he's distorted. He knows all these things, but the one thing he says is, "I am ignorant. I'm ignorant." And so he's come in completely open and prepared to change, and that's allowing me to reflect things to him, to reach him, and to provide things for him. And it stings, but he's going, "Oh, that stings, but okay, it stings for a reason. So let's just sit with that." And week 6, last week, he goes, "It's amazing, but when a client leaves me or when something happens, I'm realizing it's not about me." And I was just like, "Oh,
Yeah.
wow."
Praise,
Wow, dude.
praise.
Wow, dude.
Yeah,
You're home and hosed. As soon as you can wrap your head around, it's not about you. You are home and hosed,
yeah,
And so
that's great.
you've broken its back. So yeah, it's a big thing to surrender, but it's an
Yeah.
act of courage and strength.
And you're talking about just this openness and this, I suppose, white belt mentality. It's like, hey, I don't
Mm.
know everything. And in this particular area of my life, if I'm struggling with it and seeking help, then I don't know about. I need help there. So if I'm open and have that white belt mentality, then I'll soak in the information. I'll take the action that I'm being told. But it's so interesting how we come in and once again, ego, personal self, even though I'm coming to get help, I'm kind of defenses are up a bit like this. You know what I mean? It's like I know this, you
Well,
know.
that's protection as well because it's the unknown. So I'm going to go into this protecting myself. My walls are going to still be up a little bit here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's so
What's speaking of belts? What's the hardest belt to get in jiu-jitsu?
black, same as anything.
White.
Oh, I thought you
White
were
is the
talking about
hardest.
right. So I thought you were
White is the
genuinely
hard.
asking a question.
I was.
I'm like, why
It's,
don't
it's,
you
it was
know that? Okay, why? Go on.
white because you need to actually get off the couch and go and
You're
put
breaking the
yourself in a position.
inertia and getting started.
Yeah,
Okay, that
and
makes sense.
white is the hardest one to get because you've got nothing to relate to. It's completely foreign. It's completely new. It's yeah. The rest get more challenging in terms of technicality and everything. But the white belt's the hardest one to get because you
Yeah,
actually got to get up and learn to commit and dedicate yourself and put all these fundamental practices in place.
I love that. I love that. White belt mentality.
Yeah.
Yeah, love it. All right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. That's Michael Singer. So yeah, Untethered Soul, The Surrender Experiment, his new one, Living Untethered. He has a great. He has a
Sounds so good, doesn't it?
yeah.
It's living untethered. It sort of sounds so opposite to what he's trying to say. I had it on a t-shirt, Myndfit t-shirt, unreasonably happy since 2009, and that triggered so many people. They're like, what do you mean you're unreasonably happy? And I'm like, there's no reason for my happiness. It's just
Yeah.
I haven't got X, Y, and Z. That's just just
One thing
being
he
happy.
says is anything that happens for a reason won't stay, which means that same thing you're saying. Like, I'm happy because all right, what happens when that thing goes away, which it will invariably do so? Well, I won't be happy unless I get something else. And so it's this that conditional state instead of like, oh, you're so why are you so happy? No reason. I'm just happy. That's
I'm
beautiful.
alive. This is enough because what I'm
Yeah.
experiencing is enough. That's
Yeah.
if you can land there. Imagine that. How are you? That's basically I'm saying I'm content. I'm content with how everything is. There's no. This is Buddha. This is in love. This is. I have no preference for things to be other than how they are.
Yeah, he speaks about some of the those higher states after doing the work for a while, and he speaks about being in bed and just having this great sleep, and then he'd wake up and just he goes, I could have just stayed in bed all day because I just felt completely and utterly blissful in bed. And then he's like, oh no, there's a whole world to interact with, and so you get up and interact with the world, and it's like this just childlike, unencumbered enthusiasm as an adult, which is just my God, so beautiful.
But it's imagine trying to override the programming of I have to get out of bed and go and do something. I've told you about. I spent a day listening to Tool when the new Tool album came out, and I listened to the whole catalog and the whole new album, and I just gave myself a day off and sat in front of the fire, and I think I had a cracked open a bottle of gin at like 5 past midday or something, and and I had this little cheese platter and I had the most wonderful day by myself. And there was no part of me was not on board. I was very congruent. I was very we are all in. Every part of me surrendered to this. No part was going, but you should be seeing clients or you should be you can't stay in your pajamas all day and it comes down to giving yourself permission.
Yeah, that's
If
so
you
fun.
and
That's
not
so funny because when their new album came out, and I'm sure we spoke about it at the time. It's been a few years, but I'd had a one of my sabbatical weeks away booked, like an Airbnb outside of Dalesford, like middle of bumfuck nowhere, and obviously off the grid and that kind of thing. But yeah, the album just got released, and I bought it, and I took my big Bluetooth speaker with me, and I literally had a fire going. It sounds so similar. Had some food and everything. I just listened to the whole album and just did nothing all day apart from that. So how interesting.
but I was so that's all that existed. I was immersed in that experience, and that's look at it a bit objectively. That was meditation. That was just staying very present with one thing and not letting the mind wander off into all these different spaces, and just allowing it to be in the here and now, being in the moment.
Oh, be here now. That might be a bit of a lead on to the next episode and the teacher. Oh, there's a little hint thrown in there. The Segway King over here.
It might or it might not be.
Oh, I jumped the gun.
All may be revealed next week.
Wow. I think next week's episode 100.
Oh wow. All right. Well, I'm gonna do it on my person. I'm gonna discuss next week is Ryan Hassan.
Oh, wow. I've got plenty to say about him. Bring Melissa on as a guest, Tommy on as a guest.
All right. Well,
The real Ryan Hassan.
Do you want to park me and do you want to celebrate week 100,
We
or do
probably
you just want to
should.
keep rolling?
Bloody nice bottle of wine or something. That'd be great.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hello. All right. Well,
Let's discuss. We'll discuss it during the week, but there'll be some sort of celebration for episode 100, surely.
Surely. Reaching the ton, or it can just be another episode.
Yeah. I'm not attached to it being anything. My
I'm
personal self is not involved.
I would very happily.
I'm just going to be in service of the moment and whatever that episode needs to be.
Oh,
it took 13.8 billion years of cause and effect to get to episode 100, and I'm not going to get myself involved.
It is enough. It is enough that we're just doing an episode.
All right, people. Pleasure as always, Nico. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We'll see you next week for the 100. I hope it's 100. I'm assuming, but I think we're there. Let me check my desktop. I'm going to check. Before we sign off, I'm going to check.
Yeah, I just uploaded.
It is. 90. It is. This is 99.
Yeah, right.
See you, everyone. See you next week.
Bye.